So he will not be joining us today, but we are here to do a follow-up on a session that we held on June 27th. Actually, at that time, it was the Education and Culture Committee, chaired by Councilmember Rice. But this is really an important topic that, of course, because it does involve public facilities and so many other particular components across the government operations, we decided that the follow-up would be a joint session. And as always, the important thing to remember is that we are seeking to find and ways and fine-tune how we are able to leverage our public facilities, knowing that there continues to be an increased demand for many of our, not just buildings, but, also our parks facilities, our fields, et cetera. And as this council has worked diligently with the administration to also adopt legislation regarding racial equity and social justice, and also working on systemic and structural ways to be strategic in addressing the many challenges that we face in our communities, figuring out how we could best provide access to the various public facilities, so those activities that are aligned with our policy priorities. That continues to be, again, an area that we would like to fine-tune. And so there were some particular questions that we had when we left off, and I do want to welcome everybody who is here today. I will be passing it on to Ms. Yao to walk us through those questions and then give everyone an opportunity to introduce yourself for the record and make some comments. But Councilmember Rice, would you have any opening remarks?
No, well, thank you very much, Madam Chair. And just wanted to say that although we are approaching the end of one of our councils and the beginning of another, it's apropos for us to really start talking about a reinvention of what it is we see with CUF. And we talked about this at the last meeting. And it's not to disparage the great work that CUF has been doing. It's just as any other department or entity within this county continues to evolve, we see the same thing that needs to happen with CUF as well. And our approach with how it is that we're dealing with these types of facilities and the usage of them. And I think that, look, COVID certainly highlighted for us the need in our community for how important these public facilities are for us. And so from that standpoint, I'm really looking forward to being able to help solidify for our future members here on the council a direction for us in going of how we're going to ensure that we continue to deliver great spaces for our folks in our community and also enhance the ability for them to utilize these great spaces that are bought with their tax dollars and upkept with their tax dollars. And so, of course, we want them to be able to take advantage of these great entities that are sitting right there in their communities. And so it's hard. It's a hard balance because every single use could easily be justified. But it is important for us to make sure that we're balancing priorities. It is something that was highlighted when Councilmember Navarro brought before us the racial equity and social justice law that we now have. It really is about us creatively thinking about how best we can serve our communities that are oftentimes forgotten. And so from that standpoint, I just look forward to working with the Joint Committee in these coming months to be able to help to get us in that direction. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just also to set the context for this particular session, it's a follow-up. We did want to hear the progress of the fee study, because obviously this is going to play a role in whatever decision the council may want to make regarding access. Affordability is always an issue. Number two, the increased access to public facilities by underserved populations. Obviously, that's front and center. I do want to remind ourselves that in 2017, I did author a bill that was supported by all my colleagues to create a fund to subsidize the fees that those organizations that were serving, low-income populations could access. So that continues to be something that we want to solidify. The reclassification and recruitment of marketing and outreach manager was another item that we wanted a follow-up on. And then lastly, the MOU agreements with Parks and MCPS. I will also say that we had a little bit of back and forth discussion on, whether there could be money from the general fund that can be then assigned in order to provide further subsidies, and I believe that we do have an answer for that, so that's great. So with all of that, I will like to turn it over to Ms. Yao then to walk us through the updates, and our esteemed guests can also then speak to the different areas.
So today we have Ramona Bell Pearson, Vanessa Lopez Cuevas, and Kareem Davis with the Office of Community Use of Public Facilities, Josh Waters with the Office of Management and Budget, Seth Adams with MCPS, and Mike Riley with the Department of Parks here to discuss. The first update for the Joint Committee is on the fee study. This fee study was actually being planned prior to the pandemic, but because of the pandemic and everything that happened that disrupted CUF activities, they are now just getting that, working on that to get that into procurement and started that procurement process. The OLO report had recommended, though, that the fee study be broadened in terms of the scope to focus on possible changes to CUF fee structures and policies. So as far as the report goes, CUF is currently working with the Office of Procurement is in the process of finalizing the fee study RFP. An excerpt of the scope of services is actually listed in your packet at circles 5 to 7 of the addendum. CUF has also been working with Montgomery Parks on the fee study procurement. They've asked Director Riley to participate in the QSC selection process, and also had received information from Parks regarding potential contractors that might be interested in bidding on that. So that's an update actually on where things stand with the fee study. If the committee has any questions, there is actually additional information attached in your packet that would support actually work on the fee study, and that includes a comparative study that our summer fellows completed on how other local jurisdictions in the area permit community use of their public facilities, as well as cost and schedule information provided by Parks on renovating and maintaining ball fields.
Okay, and so the timeline again, can you?
I think I'm going to let Ms. Pearson answer that question.
Good afternoon, Ramona Bell Pearson, Director of Community Use of Public Facilities. We want to know that too. We're working with procurement. We had submitted, as Ms. Yao said earlier, prior to the pandemic, a study that was a little bit structured differently, and then we got into the pandemic and everything got delayed. Now we are broadening. We are seeking to do that. We have been informed by many things. One is the Summer Fellows program that we had. The report is attached, and it was helpful in terms of looking at the DMV area and what those jurisdictions are doing. The other thing we've looked at too is we have a new software program, which I'm sure you've heard of. It's now called RecTrack, and that has some, software codes that aren't as receptive to some of the fee structures that we have. So just by common nature and the fact that to be able to function, we're going to have to make changes. But all of those things will be informing the study, and we're very close to getting it finalized to get on the street. We're just waiting, working with procurement to see what's next.
Okay. Questions from my colleagues? No? Good. All right.
Okay. The next item is, again, the larger question about increasing access to vulnerable or underserved populations in the county. One of the questions that Chair Navarro had mentioned is there was a question about, can we appropriate general funds to support activities that CUF does, and can they be appropriated to the enterprise fund, et cetera. So we did have our council attorneys in consultation with the county attorney's office look at this question, and they concluded that the county code does allow general fund appropriation to support fee reduction or free use. So currently that happens with the facility fee assistance program. If the council's interested in seeing that happen through any other mechanisms, then we would need to work with OMB and Office of Finance to see how that would work. But there is certainly a mechanism currently that we can expand access to reduced fees or free use.
And is that something that you believe then would be done during the budget process?
I think that's probably the best way to do that. That kind of leads into the next part of this discussion is, there is certain amount of funding that we have appropriated historically for these purposes. So we have in fiscal year 23, $50,000 from the CUF Enterprise Fund and $25,000 general fund dollars that would support the Facility Fee Assistance Program. There's also another amount that supports the CAP program, which is free or reduced fees for the Silver Spring Civic Building. And in the past, with the pandemic, we had appropriated funding that really was allocated about $250,000 for fiscal year 21 and 22 of federal funds. We also, the council also made a special appropriation in 22 for $125,000, I believe, and that actually is available to be used in fiscal year 23. So we have mechanisms for ongoing budget amounts to support free or reduced, use or reduced fee use, and we also have seen that with special appropriations we've been able to increase access to facilities through those appropriations. So the table on page 3 of your packet is just a summary of the amounts that were awarded in fiscal year 21 through special appropriation, fiscal year 22 through special appropriation, and then budget 22, and then what's happened, what we know so far in 23. And it includes the total amount of awards, the permitted hours, the number of permits awarded, the number of youth benefit, and then the maximum awards that were available under each of those, pots of money. Council staff highlighted a couple questions that the joint committee may want to discuss. One is around demand. To what extent can we actually assess what the unmet demand is for access to facilities for underserved or vulnerable populations? That would also include a question about outreach. Again, if people don't know about it, how can we actually adequately assess demand? And and to that end, have there been requests for use that we've not been able to support or not? So that's the first question. The other question then is around, maximum awards and whether there are priority populations that the council wants to kind of identify. So with the special appropriation, the maximum awards was $15,000, and those were we were able to disseminate those awards. The Facility Fee Assistance Program, yearly annual program, the maximum award is $5,400. So I guess the question is if you want to see more use or use being more accessible, is that funding sufficient? Is there a difference between like those maximum awards and the size of organization that we are, supporting? And again, are there specific kinds of priority populations that we would want to build into the fee structure? For example, different jurisdictions have free use for nonprofits or whatever. And to that end, the Joint Committee may want to request follow-up information in terms of, what are budget scenarios in terms of identifying priority populations and how much it would cost to then provide more subsidy.
Yeah, one of the reasons I was asking about the timeline of the fee structure study and then also whether the budget process would be the best place was because I was also trying to figure out whether the fee structure study should answer some of these questions in order to guide the decisions that the next council is going to make during budget, because I think it is so important, and Vivian, you really truly have, identified the most important components. As the county has grown so exponentially, and as we've seen, needs really expand, especially during the pandemic, there's no doubt that this is a really important moment to take a snapshot of, what does it look like, right? What did it look like 10 years ago, 5 years ago, and then what is the need today? And then are we really, truly advertising enough or reaching into folks enough for them to know that this is available, and how would that drive? I would want for there to be something a little more substantive. I don't know, the joint committee receiving that information, we're going to be able to discern what that means. I think if there was some analysis done previously, so then when it comes back to the council, and also as the administration is getting ready to put together their budget in the fall. We are in the fall. Anyway, I think there needs to be some coordination so that the information is actually, robust, and council can make, I think, an informed decision next budget cycle. Like my colleagues, Councilmember Friedson.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with that. I think it would be really helpful. And I think it's instructive. I think the comparable jurisdictions and what they do is helpful to us. I mean, I think we should at the very least be keeping up with what neighboring jurisdictions are doing. We're not unique to having public facilities. We're not unique to having vulnerable populations, and we're not unique to having a problem connecting those two parts in our community of vulnerable populations and underserved populations, of not having adequate access historically to public facilities. And so, I don't know that we need to totally reinvent the wheel here, but we do have different organizational structures and different aspects that we have to work through and figure out. I do think having some of the questions that we're raising here as part of the fee study, as noted by Chair Navarro, would be helpful. And I also think not just having the report submitted to us, as you noted, but some analysis with a working group of the stakeholders. We need MCPS, we need the Parks Department, we need CUP, we need the executive branch and council staff and OLO, I think, as part of that working group that really understands the operational, the budgetary, the policy priorities, and then can make some tangible recommendations to us on how to address these issues. And I think it would be helpful to understand, based on the current facility fee assistance program, who is accessing that. I mean, is that functioning well and it just needs more money and more public awareness? Is that not quite reaching the targeted populations that it was intended to reach? I'm not sure I know that information. I'm not sure collectively we know that information, but I think it would be helpful, if we're going to use that as the vehicle in order to address these issues. I think we need to do a little bit further analysis to understand, how's it working, and does it just need more awareness and more money, or does it need to be, fixed and changed and tweaked, and should we be looking at how regional jurisdictions are doing it and maybe, mimicking some of their processes? So, appreciate it.
Great, Councilmember Katz, and then Councilmember Rice.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'm in the Me Too side of this. I agree that we need to do this. I think that of all the listing that Councilmember Friedson had for the stakeholders, I think we also need to include on that list the customers. That, it's one thing for all of us who are not using or the ones who are actually leasing the properties to say, well, this is the way that we can attract them. I think we need to talk to the people who we did attract and the people that tried and we couldn't attract. And when we talk about the underserved populations, how do we determine what's the fairest price for a single group? If an organization, if someone in that organization is a county resident, or is there a threshold for how many people would have to be county residents for us to consider allowing them to have a reduced fee? Is there a way, in some cases when you do that, that means that you're limiting someone who, if 10% were the threshold and you have 100 people, well, you're still affecting those 10 people that if they didn't meet the threshold, 9 people that could have been here. And then the other side of that is if we do allow someone in a reduced fee, and we have to be careful, I mean, we have to pay for the facilities. We can't, it would be nice if everything were free, but it's not. If we do that, or if we allow those reduced fees, are we actually doing something in economic development? Are we attracting someone to be here from Virginia or Prince George's County, and then ultimately might decide to move here, open up a business here, whatever? And of course, when we attract people to our area, they also go to a restaurant next door, whatever. So I think we need to look at this in a holistic way, and I think we need to do this to make certain that the facilities that we have do what we want them to do, and that's be utilized and directly affect the public that we're trying to serve. So I thank you for doing all your work. I know this is not always easy, and as I mentioned earlier today on another topic, I know you don't get enough thank yous, and we do want to thank you, we do. But we also need to figure out if we're not doing it the best way possible, what is the best way possible? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember. Chairman Rice.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. So I really want to focus on the unmet demand piece of this, because I think that, again, us trying to benchmark where we are in terms of what that need is, I've heard, as many of you who then we have forwarded to you, I'm sure you've heard as well, about folks not being aware of the types of programs that we already have in existence, as well as what it is that we're looking to do when it comes to meeting the affordability goals for so many different organizations in our community. And so from that standpoint, I do believe that there needs to be a more robust outreach. So my question is, combined with, I know that we have data in terms of the folks who, outside of CUP, work with either MCPS or work with parks, and we have databases as to who those folks are, right, who are going directly through them and not through these affordability programs. And we also know who those community members are, right? I can name some right off the bat, but that's not what this is about. It is about saying that there's so many others like them that are out there who have no idea. And it's very similar and akin to what the federal government right now is challenged with when it comes to the Affordable Connectivity Program and rolling out broadband, free broadband access to everyone. But the reality is that the uptake in terms of the success of that program is the challenge, because just because you make something affordable and make it available does not mean that people will avail themselves of it. And we have to do more in terms of our outreach. And so from that standpoint, I know MCPS has a robust text messaging system that does phenomenal. I get them every day, so thank you. It really is important for us to think about things like that. Montgomery County has a great text program that we do in terms of outreach. How do we couple these databases together? How do we bring this information together to give us one sole source way in which we can do outreach to all those folks who have done business and who continue to do business with us when it comes to utilizing our facilities? And then once we have that, that makes it easier for us for the outreach, because again, and that's still not going to get everybody. That's not going to be the ultimate panacea, but that should be our benchmark, right? That should be the benchmark that ever have used or the current users, and reaching out to them and then saying to spread the word, and then utilizing our community partners who we know are so robust. And outside of those channels, right? So our BIPOC Health Initiative programs that we have out there who do great work in the community. And, I always say, because, as I try and convince Councilmember Friedson, health is wealth. And so, I try and get him to come to my gym. He refuses. He's like, I've got my own, and that's fine.
I've seen you jump her up, and I don't have to be compared. Yeah.
But
I'm glad he looked to the right. I'm just happy that happened.
But it is important for us to, again, utilize those partners who are doing the work in the community anyway. Because those same folks who are promoting that wellness, that well-being, a lot of our healthcare partners as well, and utilizing them. They have programs to where they'll set up their nonprofits who have partnerships with Adventists as well as with Holy Cross, And once they have folks that are discharged, they reach out to them to say, hey, this is the program we want you to get involved and engaged in. Those are also folks who may utilize these same types of services and may want to utilize them to, again, benefit those communities that are harder to reach that we're trying to get to. I mean, just think about it. If you have a number of seniors and they reach out to seniors who have been hospitalized for diabetes and other kinds of things, those are the main ones who we want to get and get them to utilize our space to do programs. They're doing it at my church now, so I know. But it's one of those things where, again, there are other places that we can do it, and there are more groups that are out there. So I think that, again, us thinking outside of the box when it comes to those kinds of things, I think are going to be incredibly important for us in enhancing the success that we already have. So just wanted to put that out there. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Yao, I know you've been taking copious notes and everything for the follow-up. Awesome. All right, the next.
Okay, so the next item is about reclassification and recruitment of a marketing and outreach manager. CUF currently has a program specialist grade 18 that the position is vacant that was dedicated to handling CUF outreach and communications. But the OLO report recommended that this function is very important, and they recommended reclassifying that position to a community outreach manager or communications manager. We understood that reclassifications were frozen right now, but the executive staff report that the chief administrator officer reached out to the Office of Human Resources to ask for the position to be exempted from the freeze, and the department reports that it anticipates the reclassification will be finalized soon. Now, once that's finalized, they still need to, advertise and recruit for that position.
Okay. Well, things seem to be moving, so it's always good news. Awesome. Okay, any questions regarding that? Councilmember Peterson.
Yeah, I just have a broader question. The reclassifications are frozen. We've added a lot of positions recently over the last 2 budget cycles. I'm just curious the kind of thought process. Currently, we have hundreds of vacancies, or at least we had at the beginning of the budget year. We've approved hundreds of new positions. That would seem to be somewhat in conflict to the idea of freezing classifications. Could you just kind of explain what the timing and process of the freezing of classifications and the thinking of that vis-a-vis vacancies and
so during the election year,
decisions?
reclassifications are frozen as a matter of law, beginning July 1 of the election, the year in which the election occurs, and that lasts through the end of the calendar year. And so any reclassification that takes place during that time has to be approved and put forward by the chief administrative officer.
Got it. Okay. So this is related just to the election related. Okay. Sorry. Thanks. Appreciate that clarification.
Thank you.
Okay, the last item for consideration is an update with the relationship between CUF and parks. There was a request for an update on where things stood with the memorandum of understanding. We understand that CUF and parks have been discussing this MOU, and they've indicated they're going to be working on it this fall. There has been kind of a transition from the software that Parks, Recreation, and CUF uses, and that's that with staffing issues has kind of impeded the progress of this particular issue. But we understand that there is a draft MOU that's being worked on. Council staff notes that the MOU may be instrumental, though, in facilitating fee assistance funding to support park ball field use. This is something that happened with the federal funding that we had seen, again, this larger amount of funding, and the 2 agencies had worked out a way so that this funding could support, discounted use of park ball fields. So again, if we can get this MOU in place, then hopefully we can see some of that happening. It also may help to enhance coordination of permitting processes with the 2 agencies. And we understand that they've worked together really well in the past. They've kind of, the processes are very similar, but there are a few areas that council staff just noted that maybe there's an opportunity to kind of use fresh eyes to look at. And one is around fees for ball field use. I think there's been an effort to try and, in the past at least, get fees close to each other so that, users who are looking for school ball fields or park ball fields aren't, confused by the different amounts that are being charged. I think it seems like since the pandemic, that gap has been rising a little bit as far as what park charges and what Cup charges, but it also varies depending on what kind of field is being, licensed or permitted. So I guess one question is there a desire and is it feasible to have consistent fees, across the agencies regarding, fees for ball fields? I don't know if you want me to go through all the questions or if you want to hear a response.
Yeah, I mean, I assume there's a desire, given the confusion out there. So would love to hear a little bit about where that stands. Or I don't know, Mr. Riley, would you like to start?
Good afternoon. It's great to be with the committee this afternoon. I'll just start at a high level by saying the Parks Department is completely committed to the agenda of equitable access to our fields and to our programs and the removal of barriers to participation for anybody. We're completely committed to that goal. So the fees, we do benchmarking exercises typically every few years. The last time we did a benchmarking exercise on field costs was 2021. We took it to the planning board and we look at surrounding jurisdictions and proposed a modest fee increase that actually will go into effect in 2023. So all of the leagues and agencies that would use our fields are aware of what that fee increase could be. I believe for the majority of the fields that we permit are in the community parks or the local parks. I believe they're $9 an hour, and depending upon whether they're youth or adult leagues, they're going to go up to either $10 or $11. Did I get that generally right? And so that do I believe that the fees for MCPS fields and park fields should be the same? I do, in general. I think this fee study should look at that. There are some nuances. It used to be that the MCPS elementary and middle school fields were not maintained at the same level as the park fields. Now, the majority, not all, I have to get my plug in, because we still have elementary school fields that are not in the Parks Department's fold. In other words, we have not renovated them. We do not maintain them. There's a handful left that depend upon CIP funding to get to, but that's no longer true. Generally, the quality and condition of a MCPS elementary or middle school field should be on par with a parks field. The parks fields generally do have greater access to restrooms, so there's some nuances that should probably be looked at, but I don't think we should be at $5 and 9 hours. $9, I think we should generally be of the same level. And I'd be interested to hear if Ramona has any other thoughts.
Well, we ran into a situation years ago when we had an enterprise fund that was very healthy. And at that time, we had great advice from OMB that it would not be logical or feasible to raise fees because the community would be limited in terms of causing more expense for them to have access. And at the same time, because we had a healthy enterprise fund, we really didn't need to raise fees to be able to do the program or the permitting that we do. However, I will say that a big factor for the community in terms of the fee difference has been access to other amenities associated with the fields, because Mike just alluded to the fact that there are many that don't have restrooms. So in order to have access to a restroom, you would have to also permit the school. If you permit the school, then you have an additional fee attached to the field. We have worked with MCPS and neither side has been very interested or supportive, and Mr. Adams is here and can talk about that too, in putting porta potties on fields, because that has its own issues there. And then there's an issue of, we still would need personnel to be able to support that, and that's an additional expense, because right now, when we permit fields, we don't permit staff to necessarily be available for the fields, because it's sort of a self-maintaining type situation. You're supposed to police your own areas for, trash and everything. So I will say, it would be more consistent for the community if we had the same fees, but I think we would have a lot of pushback if the fields aren't maintained in the same way. Because we've always heard that one of the reasons when we got into the pandemic and we were able to have funding through the ARPA or the CARES Fund to allow access to parks fields, that for the first time we had groups that were able to use turf fields that had never been able to, or fields with lights that had never been able to. And as a result of that, people know now, they have a discerning taste, and they know that some fields are kept in a very nice way, and then others are at the mercy of being an elementary school that's smaller, that may not be on the list for Maryland National Capital Park and Planning, and it's just, there's a differentiation. So those are the things we're dealing with. We do plan to make that a dialogue in the fee study, because we are looking at other jurisdictions, and when I talk to other jurisdictions, they've had their own issues with regard to fields that are, their fields are nice and they charge a flat rate so that they can have full access, and then they found that there was a undercurrent of a market going on where the users were then subletting the fields and getting a lot of money off of it based on the low expense that they paid to actually rent it. So these are all things that we're going to be considering as we talk to our hopefully successful bidder with regard to the fee study. And again, we're going to encourage them to look at other jurisdictions and broaden it, because I know there was, I think in 2020, maybe there was an OLO summer fellow program that looked at jurisdictions, and they looked at Georgia and California, and we used that to inform our summer fellows as they looked more locally. So we've got now a larger and a local comparison to be used for this RFP.
Thank you. That is, yeah, I think that having the opportunity for the fee study to really go deep into a lot of these nuances is going to be so critical, because of course, the larger context, and you alluded to that during the pandemic, some folks had access that they didn't have before, and I know I keep thinking about all of the times that we have funded particular programs, whether it was, Soccer for Change, or, all of these programs that are actually connected to positive youth development, because they're trying to address a very challenging issue that we sometimes deal with, not only in the community, but also in the school system, right? Because the more that we can engage students, the better it's going to be once they enter the classroom on that Monday morning, et cetera. But then if we don't have access to the fields in an equitable way, we're literally like back to square one. And so that's why I think this fee study is going to be so critical, because in my humble opinion, it should be centered on that area of that equity gap, number one. That should be the real priority. And whether then there has to be a fund that complements that wear and tear, that use or whatever, because we can't be blind to the fact that the fields have to be maintained. I don't know, maybe that needs to be, but the whole idea of this being sort of like an enterprise sort of, endeavor is what I think even back in 2017, when we were deliberating on the bill that created that subsidy fund, I think that's also, it's a main question, right? Should this be just an enterprise fund, or should we also be looking at this as part of the different tools that we have in the toolbox to address complex issues in our community? In my opinion, there's a conflict there that we have to also resolve. So hopefully, again, the fee study this is becoming a larger and larger, scope of work, but so necessary, as well.
May I also add that one of the things that we've been working very closely with Mr. Riley and his group on is the fact that even though we're enterprise, and even when we had a budget or a fund that was healthy, we still weren't able to give enough money for maintenance of the fields. So if you're looking at appropriation and you're trying to decide between appropriating so that there would be low or no fees, versus or including an appropriation that would allow for maintenance and maintain, operations of the fields. Because we are a permitting entity and not a programming entity, we have always focused on availability and making sure that there's equal access. We haven't focused on, which hasn't been our responsibility, the level of asset that we have in terms of how many fields, what the nature of those fields are, what the status is, how appropriate they are. We do inform people when they seek a permit, well, if you're going to have a group of this size with this type of activity, you may want to go here versus there because it's more feasible. But that's just us looking at what exists. If there were a support system, and again, I don't believe in free fees, because we have found when we do things for no fee at all, even a minimal fee, people don't they don't respect the facility. They'll make a lot of permits and then not use half of them. They'll, not have respect for the maintenance upkeep of it. So we do need to have some skin in the game, for lack of a better term, from the users. But I think that there's a balance there. And when we talk about, and I apologize, I should have mentioned this earlier when we were talking about outreach and communications, we have done a lot of things since 2020 to improve and increase our outreach abilities. Even without this position being fully manned and at the appropriate grade level, we have been working with Children's Opportunity Fund. We've been working with the child care providers. We've been working with MCPS Parks. We've been working with Positive Youth Development. We've been working with other aspects of HHS, such as the linkages to learning, because it became very, very clear to me when we got into this pandemic situation that the areas that were easiest to stand back up in terms of the distance learning and the hubs that we did were those that had existing childcare and resources in their communities and in their schools. And when we looked overall at the Title I schools, and I know you've heard me say this before, it's like beating a continual drum, we did not find those resources in the Title I areas. So we began to talk to Collaboration Council, because they're our local management board, and to see what they could help us stand up. And that was the way Children's Opportunity Fund got some supports, and the Brown and Black Coalition. So we have already started to put those tentacles out there with the intent to have the resources there once we get the person in the position, but that doesn't mean we're not already trying. I mean, Mr. Davis is on the phone constantly with people. He can probably tell you every community member or group in this area who has the need, and they know him, and if they don't know him, he calls them and introduces himself. So we are very actively doing those kinds of things.
I think the way you just described is basically the ethos, right, of how this needs to be revamped. The pandemic kind of came to teach us a lot of lessons, and perhaps you just described that. We have to move away from just looking at this as, okay, it's, scheduling it, and it's, it's a facility, but it is part of this broader ecosystem of how we are addressing those complex issues that families and youth and children face, and you being in the center of that with a different sort of task, right? It's going to be important, because these assets, these facilities are in the epicenter of a lot of these activities that then will result in better outcomes. And so I think you just laid it out beautifully, how it is that, hopefully, ideally, this will work moving forward. Before I turn to Councilmember Rice and then Friedson, Mr. Adams, I wanted to give you an opportunity to make some comments or respond to.
No, thank you, committee, for the opportunity. I echo, obviously, the comments from Ms. Bell-Pearson. One thing I did want to just add, though, and Councilmember Katz mentioned this earlier, is that I think, at least from a school system, from a parks, from community use, public facilities perspective, we are always looking for ways to get more users in, particularly from a school perspective. We worked through an MOU here recently that we are focusing on a lot of school-sponsored events that folks don't have to necessarily pay for use of fields or buildings through that. But the one thing that we do realize, though, is it's people that are impacted by this. People need to be able to manage these facilities. It's our custodial services, it's our maintenance. So we continue to sort of ask individuals to do more and more, and everyone is willing to do more and more, especially for kids, particularly from a school system. But at some point, everything from adding porta pots to sites to adding additional hours well beyond what we're what we're staffed to do does to create a tax on some of those folks that are responsible for the care. So, we continue to look for ways to partner. I think you start to band together resources, maybe you have a fighting chance for some of these functions. But I did want to just say, echo the comments of Councilmember Katz, that it does cost money, and it's not necessarily the money, it's the people that are ultimately involved in this. So yes, we are currently opposed to Porta-Johns on school sites for a variety of reasons, but mostly because we do not feel that we would be able to adequately maintain and manage that. And we certainly don't want to create a situation that would be unsafe or unsanitary for kids throughout their school day opportunities as well. But again, thank you very much for the opportunity.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate that. I really do appreciate you saying that. I mean, my days on the Board of Education, this is something that we would discuss in terms of the need for staff to obviously, make sure that all of those extra things that went around staffing, the after hours and all of that is really important. But again, I think I would just, especially for my colleagues who are coming back, I would just urge everybody to kind of think a little bit outside the box, right? Do a little bit more lateral thinking around the complex issues that are in front of us right now, especially after the pandemic. And that might require some, legislation or some policy changes and some budgetary, decisions that are outside of what we're doing right now, to ensure that there would be the appropriate staffing to take care of that. Because if we don't see this as a continuation of either, the school system or the after-school activity or the positive youth development or whatever, then it will never get there. And we will be stuck in this whole cycle of always lamenting how come we have not the best outcomes for some of our kids, right? So it's a big task, I understand, but I think we can get there, eventually. I really do. Chairman Rice.
Thank you very much. Mr. Riley, you'll recall when we had Germantown Panthers that was playing at Kingsview and Germantown, the field right behind Germantown Recreation Center, that was full of rocks. I know because my daughters cheered for the football team that was out there. It was horrible conditions, but they still paid. And I think that, again, our community will pay for something if they believe that it's of quality. So I agree with you, Ms. Bell-Pearson, that we don't need to talk about something that is free. I know because the rates went up for the price that we paid when we moved to Ridge, and it was an incredible brand new turf field, so they could charge more money. And so again, but it's within reason, right? So that's why I think this fee study will be appropriate. But I do think the overarching question was about whether or not we keep those prices consistent. And I think that the key for us is for the amenities that you get, nobody's asking for a Rolls Royce at Toyota prices. What we're saying is if you don't have a bathroom, well, then maybe there's a tiered price for that, but it should be across the board for everyone so that those fields are there. If it's a turf field versus a regular natural grass field, maybe there's a differential there when it comes to those kinds of things, and folks will decide, right? How much can we afford for what it is that we want while still delivering high quality aspects? It just may not be top tier. You may not be playing in the stadium at the soccerplex when you're playing your soccer game, but you're playing at a field that's still very well maintained and great for an affordable price. I think those expectations are what we need to temper to the extent of not saying that we need to go so far that we make something that is unattainable a requirement for this entity, whether it's CUP or whatever it'll be called or whatever. But I think that at the same time, there does need to be consistency. So, Mr. Riley, I couldn't agree with you more. And we've been partners with you on this journey to try and get us, and Mr. Adams, as well, to get parks to maintain more of these fields. And I think we're already headed in that direction. So now is the appropriate time. That's why I keep saying that this is actually the perfect time for us to press the reset button on all of these things and start to rethink about what it is that we do. So I agree with you. There should be no one who's pushing us to do and say that you have to have a bathroom on a field for it to be rented or have access to it. No, let people choose. And people will make decisions. I remember for all the times that I've rented space at the parks to do birthday parties for my daughters, Sometimes we wanted to have it close to the, adventure playground. Other times we wanted to have it closer to, to the Seneca Valley Park and other kinds, and Black Hills and all kinds of stuff. It just all depends on what it is you want. And so, but it should be consistent in those same things. So, picnic table venue at, the soccerplex that doesn't have a bathroom near it should be the same as at Wheaton, should be the same that's at Sligo, should be the same. Whatever it is, we need to keep that consistency. And so I think that that's what will be important, because then it will push us to also make sure that the amenities are consistent across the board as well, and drive us, if we are to ensure our financial stability, right? Because that's a big part of this as well, working with finance to make sure that that financial stability will come by having better stuff as well, right? So the more investment we put in it, the better we take care of it, the more accoutrements we can offer to people. It also will allow for us to make sure that we get more money, and at the same time allow for us to have more folks who are involved and engaged. And wouldn't it be great if you had everyone who had an affordable price to be able to have their kids play on high quality fields? Because that's what the case study was we saw from our summer fellows for neighboring jurisdictions, right? When I think about Howard County, because we used to play them, right? And so I go up there and see the fields there. And so everybody would come back and they'd be like, Craig, the first thing they do is reach out to me, right? District council member, Craig, why does Howard County, you see all these big fields they have in this complex? Why don't we have anything like that in Montgomery? It's coming, right? And so we need to deliver on that, because we understand, and it's going to require investment, right? It's going to mean that when Mr. Riley comes and asks my colleagues for additional resources to be able to make sure that we're doing that and increasing maintenance, that needs to happen. We need to make sure that when it comes to our entity that will be managing these, that they have the appropriate resources, and we have the positions, thank you, because I know it's underway, to make those things happen, right? All of that stuff, that investment needs to be there as well. But we will recoup some of those costs, because again, the folks who are like, I'm not paying for something because I feel as though it's substandard, will pay to a certain extent for something that's of better quality. I've seen it before, and I know that that's what folks are saying to the community as well. So I think that we're there at that point, as you heard from the chairwoman, that's where we are. We're at that point now where we can actually start to say, we're going to rethink this differently, and we can turn the corner in terms of saying that we'll actually start providing these types of high quality services, understanding that it will cost a little bit, but we can make it manageable for those who need that assistance, just as she said, with a fund or whatever to help, like you set up before, to be able to help allay some of those costs for those that need it. But there are those who may not, because they'll be able to recoup by charging folks more. It happens. And if people are serious about what it is that they want for their children, they're going to make those decisions too, right? There are people who are in travel programs for soccer, and there are folks that have soccer just for their kids and just to enjoy themselves, right? That's where my kids were, because I was like, no. But, I mean, in all seriousness, it's what you decide, right? We need to make sure that we've got choices that are available, because we understand that Montgomery County has a wide swath of folks, from those who can afford some of the most exorbitant and expensive, to some folks that are struggling each and every day to just make ends meet. And so how do we meet that need? It's not easy, but that's what the rate study will help us to discern and figure out what that right number is, and then we base it off of that. But our quality should never dip below what it is that we want, and that consistency in terms of those standards should be across the board. That's just my thoughts. So, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councilmember Friedson.
Thank you. I agree, and as somebody who played rec sports and travel sports all on lots of fields in Montgomery County, I can attest to that these are issues that are old issues that are continuously becoming more and more challenging as we have a county that is changing, and that's a good thing, that we have growth and we have changes, but we have to address and adapt to those changes when, change happens, you have three choices. You can ignore it, you can fight it, or you can adapt to it. And our charge here is to adapt to the change that the community is demanding, and largely the community is dictating, because we serve the community, all of us. And I think that brings us to the point. I don't think most residents know the difference between who controls what facility, and most residents don't care who controls which facility. I will say, and all of us have been in many conversations, the most frustrating conversations that I believe I have as a council member are when I try to explain who controls what facility and what building and what the process is to address a problem or a concern or a policy question or an operational issue at one of those facilities. From the public standpoint, we're the government. We're supposed to be here to serve. And it's our job to figure out how to coordinate amongst ourselves to make it easy for them as the user who we're serving to make that as simple as possible. So I agree. I think we are in a good moment to do this. I think we've done a lot of work here to get to this point, not just on the equity side of things, which we talked about quite a bit and needs to be the start of the conversation, but also when it comes to the movement of ball fields and the support for that. I'm proud of this council carrying on the baton of the prior council and continuing that work, which has been a long time coming. We fought back against cuts to parks and repeatedly in order to address some of these issues, because we understand that the maintenance of these facilities are critical and are going to cost more money. So I think we're in a good point. But if we want to change the outcome, we have to change the inputs. That Chair Navarro was noting. We have to change the way we do business if we want to change the outcomes that we're creating from the work that we do. And so I think that this is critical. And I do think we should get out of the system, as Chair Rice was noting. When I was a user, and now continuously, still the conversation that we're having, there is a dynamic where you feel like you either beat the system or you were cheated by the system in terms of the field that you end up on, the price that you're paying. And if we're going to use the Toyota to Rolls-Royce comparison that you used, if you're paying for a Toyota, you shouldn't necessarily get a Rolls-Royce. And if you're getting a Toyota, you shouldn't get, or you're paying for a Toyota, you shouldn't get a car that doesn't start. And so we have to figure out a way to create that level of fairness. I understand the concern about free facilities, and that should be part of the conversation as well. We all have a shared obligation to take care of what we have. We want everybody to be part of it, and I don't think that saying that free is the only way to go on this is it has to be where we end up. I think that's important. I appreciate the fact that we're noting the people who actually have to do the work, because that is significant and can't just be underappreciated and undervalued, because that is really how we get to where we want to go. But ultimately, I agree. I think the tiered structure, as you mentioned, it doesn't matter which department or agency happens to own a facility, but if it's renovated versus not renovated, if it has access to bathrooms versus not have access to bathroom, I think there's a fairly simple checklist that we can have, and that changes the pricing. And I think the work group that we had talked about earlier that has the relevant stakeholders, that is informed by the rate study, can help us get there. But I think, ultimately, it's got to be centered around equity. It's got to be centered around the users who actually, we're here to serve, and we have to get out of the, turf war to, probably relevant to this discussion, but over, whose facility it is, because ultimately, I think all of the policy decisions that we make have to be centered around the people who are actually using them, and they don't care. And so, we have to care, but we should make it so that they don't have to care in terms of who's responsible for the facilities. And we should make this process as simple as possible, as easy to use as possible, and as consistent as possible, while also achieving the ultimate policy goals. And then the last piece, I couldn't agree more with what Chair Navarro has been saying this entire conversation. These are public facilities and they have to serve public interests. And so we do need to rethink the enterprise program in general. And it doesn't mean that CUF needs to rethink their enterprise program or Parks needs to rethink their enterprise program. Perhaps they do, but we have to rethink it from the policymaking side. And we have to, if we want, certain activities to happen, we may have to subsidize them to happen. If we want to, charge less in order to get a certain outcome, then we have to pay the difference, just like any other public policy decision that we make. If we want to provide an incentive for something to happen, we have to pay for the consequences of that incentive. And in this case, they're not even unintended consequences. They're in the intended consequences of the policy decisions for the behaviors that we are trying desperately to either initiate or accelerate. And so we should be, accepting those consequences. We should be, frankly, happy about those consequences, and then we should make the necessary decisions, including the funding, to make sure that the impacts don't have disproportionate and negative results. And we can do that. We have the power to do that. And talking about the type of money that we're talking about here and the scheme of all of the other things that we do, the order of magnitude in terms of cost is very small. The order of magnitude in terms of impact, as Chair Navarro was mentioning with the youth development issues, as Ms. Bell-Pearson was talking about, of all the coordination that's starting to happen, that I'm really glad to hear about. The impact is enormous. So let's do it. Let's make this happen. Let's make it happen sooner rather than later. And I'm just really glad that we're moving the ball forward on this much needed conversation.
Awesome. All right. Anything else?
Yeah, there's two more items that are highlighted in your packet regarding differences between CUF's practice and Parks practice, and they're related to historical use as well as priority use policies, and also related to really, I think those policies then kind of lead into questions about racial equity and social justice. So my understanding is that the agencies handle historical use differently. And I think the overall question would be, how do these historical use policies then, impact underserved groups that, maybe never got a chance to get on fields? And then if we are continuing with historical use, does that limit them from accessing particular facilities? And then priority use too, CUF, like actually many local jurisdictions, provides priority use for our public recreation programs, not just our department, Montgomery County Department, but also local municipalities. And so I don't believe that Parks provides that priority. So again, the question is, would that serve a public interest goals or social justice goals to have consistent policies?
Yeah, thank you. I for some reason, when we were having the conversation about trying to do, have parity, this popped into mind as you had described that. So I thought that it was understood that we would like for things to get aligned as much as possible. But Mr. Riley, if you can just elaborate.
Yeah, I'm really glad these two things came up of historical use policy. And I know we're placing a lot on this fee study, but I think that should be a big part of that discussion. A big volume of the permits we issue to fields go to the big user groups you all know that had those fields before. You know who they are. They're MSI, they're Only Boys and Girls Club, they're Montgomery County Little League. I could go on and on. And it is a question really to step back and look at. There are new leagues that pop up. There are other users. But the rationale for historical use is as these leagues grew, they needed some level of comfort that next season they would have the fields to run their programs, whether they're nonprofit or for-profit. But I am all for this fee study looking across the country as to how you do this balancing act, which is respect the leagues that have grown over time and hopefully are serving a lot of the objectives you want to achieve through youth sports participation in some equitable way by making sure that the door is open to the newcomers in an equitable way. I don't have the answers, but I really want that I'm so glad that I'll be partnering with CUPF on this fee study when we get this consultant engaged to pick their brains about, is there a way to achieve these objectives, and is historical use the answer, or is there another answer? Now, on the recreation piece, of course, we want to support the recreation department and their programs. They are a beneficiary from the historical use perspective. They're the same as the leagues I mentioned, where if they depend upon fields, and if they're going to be subsidized in any way, or those programs are going to be subsidized, we just look at how that's to be done. Not necessarily maybe through the park tax, but through some, appropriate mechanism that we could look at. And if I may just get in one quick infomercial while you allowed me to put my mic on. We've been talking a lot about athletic fields. On Wednesday, September 28th, we are doing an athletic field showcase at Wheaton Regional Park. This is where we show how we have achieved greater and better fields in the school system and in Montgomery Park. So we showcase our equipment. We walk people through in a very digestible way how we're making these fields better. And to use the Toyota and Rolls-Royce analogy, what we do not want is people walking on a park or school field and finding a Yugo. That's what we used to have. And we don't want anybody paying for that in any way. We want from the Toyota up to the Rolls-Royce or the Beamer or whatever you achieve. And I'll just end on a very optimistic note. 20 years ago, I was pretty depressed about our ability to truly improve the quality of these public fields. There's 700 of them between the parks and the schools. We would go out and renovate them and spend money, and you'd come back 2 years later and they wouldn't be much better than they were. But the technology that we have, the Bermuda grasses, the machinery, the aerification equipment we have now, what I'm seeing is we spend that upfront money and go back 2 or 3 years later, and you are not on rocks, you're not on dirt, you're not on dust. You're actually grass is where grass is supposed to be, and dirt is where dirt is supposed to be. So I agree with you. I appreciate the good words about the progress there. We are in a good place there. And I think what we want is everybody to have a quality field. It may be different quality between high schools, regional parks, and local parks and elementary schools, but it will be a quality field. And then we're trying to just answer the question, how do you make sure everyone has access?
Thank you. I know we have 2 lights on. Before I turn it over to Councilmember Rice and then Councilmember Katz, I'll just say, I've been having a lot of conversations with folks regarding, the next chapter of our racial equity and social justice work. As I leave in December, I feel pretty good about what we have achieved thus far, because, previous to 2019, we would talk about this in a very sort of just general way, or, whenever it would come up, et cetera. But now we have a law. And I think that the next chapter now is going to be how exactly is that law going to be implemented. And to me, it's so central to this whole entire conversation that we're going to have to truly revamp, restructure, a lot of these processes and a lot of these programs, and what were they intended to do? Because at the end of the day, we'll never achieve, high quality of life in the county unless we are that specific. And I'll just share my experience just, with the tour of the new Odessa Shannon Middle School, formerly, Ebrook Lee Middle School. And what really struck me about this new facility that is really state of the art. I mean, MCPS did an incredible job in the design, the architecture, the use of natural light, the quality of all of those labs. I mean, when you walk into a music lab, I just had tears in my eyes the whole entire time. Digital lab. And this is the middle school with the highest farms rate in the county. It is literally 99% kids of color. But when I was touring that school, all I could see was the future success of each and every one of those students, because now they were not walking into a room that had, mold and weird stuff falling from the ceiling and just darkness. And, they were walking in a state-of-the-art facility that sent this message that you can achieve whatever you want, because now you're exposed to this extraordinary opportunity. And so I use that as just an example of what it is that hopefully we can aspire to in the county. That as we talk about fields and the big leagues, et cetera, well, not all kids even know that there's a big league or can afford, or mom and dad can't take you, but perhaps we can slowly get there. We've come such a long way that I'm just really thrilled to be able to hopefully look back to see what this next chapter looks like. Because just like, this Odessa Shannon Middle School, what it has, I think, done, we're going to save so much money just by virtue of having made that investment in what this will mean for that community, right? And so, not everything is just dollars and cents right now, but it's just a long-term vision that I hope we can get to that place as well with our facilities. Councilmember Rice.
So this conversation has got me thinking, and so, Ms. Bell-Pearson, I'm really happy that you brought your heavy hitters with you, because I've got some questions regarding the historical use, but more importantly, how it relates to those who are not the historical users. Do we keep track of folks who have applied for sites and then been turned down because the site's not available, and then do we know where they then go? Because as Mr. Riley referred to these new upstarts that are coming, and so I'm assuming if they tried to get a field at the Soccerplex, which is pretty much taken up by MCLL, and rightfully so, I understand they're a big organization, been there for a while, where do they go? Or do they just dissolve, or what?
So during the facility fee assistance process, we asked the group for their top 5 of where they would like to go. So this is not the first choice. So the first choice is not available, we try to permit the second choice. The second choice is not available, we try to permit the third choice, and so forth and so on. So generally we try to find a location. We try our best not to turn anyone away. That's an old practice that we've tried to go away from. And so, like I say, in the last 2 years, we haven't turned any group away to say that we cannot find a space for you.
That is phenomenal, because then that then leads to what we're talking about. Then it is just about priority in terms of having the quality of field that you want. The only reason why you'd pick one over another is because there's some sort of amenity or there's the quality of the field that makes it better. And it reminds me of, as we were sitting here and you were having this conversation, I thought about our conversation about schools. And thank you, because I don't know how you channeled that, but I was thinking it, and you just said it about Odessa Shannon. And it's the same thing as Harriet Tubman that I just walked into in the heart of Gaithersburg/Montgomery Village, to where we now have these high quality, in terms of the school itself, the infrastructure, in terms of the people and the staff were always high quality. But now we have a building that matches what we have on the inside. All we're saying is that once we get that for all of these fields, whether you got first or second or third, maybe one's a little bit closer to your neighborhood and to some of the kids, and this one's a little bit farther. But if we really have it to where they're actually of that same quality, and it just may be one has better, like we said, may have some enhancements that are a little bit different. You may have a bathroom that's on site, that's a real bathroom and not even a porta potty or whatever. And so everybody wants to be there, or it's close to something else. So be it. But if that's what I have to deal with in terms of the inequities that exist, we're in a great place. So to me, that's what it sounds like. It sounds like there needs to be that continued focus in terms of investment in bringing up the level of these other facilities to that same level, understanding that there are some that you won't be able to get to that level, right? We can't have turf fields across the county. I know you'd love that, Mr. Riley. I know. I know that's... Well, maybe not.
The preferred field of the future is going to be Bermuda.
Well, yes.
Synthetic turf.
And actually, thank you for saying that, because I will say that in my investigatory practices that I've invited Councilmember Friedson to as well, in looking at our golf courses throughout the county, that's where they're headed. They've actually reseeded so many of their fairways and done Bermuda instead, because they've realized that it's hardy in this area. and stands up to a lot of use over and over again and is very resilient. So from that aspect, I think we're getting to a place, just like you said, with technology and with new synthesized versions of these grasses that are really going to help us to achieve what it is that we're looking to accomplish. So I don't see as much of the challenge when it comes to historical use, because that would then be from a perspective of, well, which field is better and who gets the better field. If they're all really good fields and some may be great, which you still may have folks want to have, but they get a better or a good field, there's nothing wrong with that, right? And I don't think there's an expectation amongst folks that I should have the greater field, right, all the time, or whatever the case would be. And you could still rotate. Those are things where, again, so even your bigs who may have a good field instead of the best field really doesn't matter as long as they're on a good field, right? And so I think that for us, as again, you heard the chair say about talking about progression, I keep saying I think that we've rounded that corner in terms of changing the paradigm of this discussion. This is no longer about how do we choose which ones suffer, as you heard Councilmember Friedson say, versus those who feel as though they've won. Now it's just a case of, okay, I got my preference and I got my second preference and it's fine. It's like my daughter in school, you know, she wanted her top tier school and I was like, baby, it's too expensive and they didn't give you any money, but you went to Colorado State and got money and it's a great school. So again, we make these decisions, and I say that because we make these decisions as parents, as individuals, as students all the time based on so many different things. It doesn't mean that it's a bad thing. Right? You don't feel any loss because you didn't go to this school or that school because it was still a really good school for you. And so I think in the same spirit, if we have really good options for people, that's really what this is about. And if we can deliver those really good options, then historical nature, recreations, historical use, it really shouldn't matter at that point. So those become obsolete arguments if we're delivering that quality. So that's just... Thank you.
All right, I think Councilmember, I thought it was Pizza. Do you have your light on? Oh, okay, Cap, sorry. No names here, so I just have to like figure it out.
It's just dots. He's looking forward to help him get out of it.
Yeah, it was me.
That's another one. Councilmember Cap.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I do think we have to be very careful about the historical use. Because if an organization that's been in existence and probably we have some organizations that have been in existence for many, many years, they do have to have consistency for planning. And at what point, in one hand, you want to make certain that they're there and that they've certainly served their community for all those many years and had great successes. But we also don't want to stymie other organizations from being there. And when we don't build the new fields, which we have and we haven't at times, when we don't build the new fields, that sort of limits those new organizations from being there. And that becomes an issue. But we can't, and just because we get a new customer doesn't mean we want to get rid of our old customers. So there has to be that that type of concern. And the other issue, and I think that the tier system makes a whole lot of sense. You certainly, to your point, we certainly don't. If you put a porta potty on an elementary school, that's causing issues beyond that day for that field. It might work after school, but what happens during school? And what problems are we causing? And if someone decides, I don't know how they lock them or if they lock them, and if they do, what does that do? There's so many issues that it looks very simple that we could do that cause more problems than we solved. So I think we need to be very, very careful on everything that we do. And I think that's what you're doing. I think that with this study, with the discussions, there again, everybody wants it yesterday, and that includes me. I'd like this to be done fairly quickly, but I think we need to make certain that as quickly as we can do it, that we get it finished, and that we come back to make certain that how we're doing it makes a lot of sense. And I like the whole idea for a tier system. At some point, maybe you don't need to have that tier system because everyone, to your point, is going to be of Super Bowl quality. I doubt if that's going to happen, and I doubt if that's going to happen all at once. So I think it makes sense. But thank you very much, and thank you for what you're doing. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Okay, I think that wraps up the items in the packet. Thank you so much, Ms. Yao, for that packet, and I want to thank all our guests for their incredible work. As was mentioned before, we have come a long way. This is what government is all about, is continuous improvement. We're always looking for ways to tweak things and, get at our target as quickly as possible and as effective as possible. And you all have done an amazing job. So I don't know. We'll see when we come back, whether it's going to be before the term ends or not. But if not, I think that there's a lot already in place for our next council to definitely work on. So thank you all. We're adjourned.